House in Baltimore, and Thursday night football and color rushes and the purple against the orange. It will not be the Orioles. That would be the Miami Dolphins. He is a freelance broadcast journalist doing that for over a decade now down in South Florida in Miami, covering all things Dolphins. An insider there at 790 The Ticket now. You can find him out on Twitter as well at his name, Greg Likens. That's Likens. He is one of our defending champions for all things fish and fins, and certainly a 4-2 version of the Dolphins that everyone's disappointed in coming up here to take on a Ravens team where, Greg, we're struggling up here, man. This is a bad look for the Ravens right now.
Yeah, Nestor, it's good to be on with you again, and you're right. I mean, I think it's an interesting contrast. The Ravens are below expectations from what everybody thought, not playing very good football. The Dolphins are above expectations in terms of the record, but it hasn't been pretty the way they've gotten to 4-2. At the end of the day, you don't complain about the 4 wins, but certainly, at least statistically, we're going to see 2 of the worst offensive teams in football on Thursday night.
And we know how Thursday night football goes. It usually sucks to start with, other than last Thursday, where at least it was exciting, but you generally don't get a very good look. Certainly for the Ravens coming back with a Wallace injury in Minnesota, as well as just, third-string receivers, backup guys all over the field at this point, and Flacco really, really scuffling. I'm sure with the Dolphins on their third quarterback after Tannehill and Cutler and a guy that we know around here and you know very well down there in Miami and Matt Moore, I'm expecting Jay Ajayi is going to get a heavy dose of running the football until such point where the Ravens defense can do something they haven't been able to do recently, which is stop it.
Yes, and that's been the key for the Dolphins. They get Jay Ajayi going, they're a different team. Now, I think what is going to work to his advantage is that Jay Cutler, despite his reputation, he wasn't throwing the football down the field during his time on the field for the Miami Dolphins. And Matt Moore proved when he came into the second half due to the injury against this past week against the Jets, all of a sudden, he was getting the ball out fast. He was pushing the ball down the field. He was throwing players open. There was a spark. There was an energy. And suddenly the running game got going because Jay Ajayi had been bottled up the entire game. The Jets have a very good front seven, and it was the second matchup between the teams, and both times they had a really good advantage over Jay Ajayi. But I think Matt Moore coming into this game, his willingness to be a gunslinger, and that's been his mentality over the course of his career, will help Jay Ajayi and open things up against his Ravens team.
Yeah, you mentioned the quarterback situation and whether it's better for the offense with Matt Moore than Jay Cutler. What's wrong with Matt Moore? Why wasn't he good enough for Adam Gase back in July? What makes Jay Cutler an upgrade at this point in his career?
Nestor, I've been asking that question for weeks. That's a great question because I've been publicly imploring Adam Gase to use some common sense and start Matt Moore instead of Jay Cutler. Now, when Jay Cutler was signed, that made sense because he and Gase had the history together. They worked together in the 2015 season in Chicago. So of all the available quarterbacks, I mean, there was familiarity there. So I understand why they did that. But I thought at the time they should have had an open competition. Adam Gase has brought in Jay Cutler, and part of it is because they paid him $10 million, but to be the starter. And even in the home opener against the Titans a few weeks ago, when, thanks to a defensive score, they were able to muster 16 points on the scoreboard in a win, the home crowd was cheering for Matt Moore to come into the game, chant and booing Jay Cutler on the field. And Adam Gase said after the game, unless Jay Cutler gets hurt, Matt Moore is not going to see the field. And, well, wouldn't you know it, this past week, Jay Cutler gets hurt, Matt Moore comes in and erases a 14-point deficit in the fourth quarter to win the game. So Matt Moore, I think the perception is there's a reason why he's been a backup for so long. Excuse me. But in reality, he knows this offense, and I think the most important thing, Nestor, is that in that locker room, there's a huge level of respect for him. You could argue that even when Ryan Tannehill has been the starter in recent years, Matt Moore was the bigger leadership presence in the locker room. So I think that translates on the football field. The only downside is there seems to be this thought that he can't sustain this level of play for a full season, but we'll find out over the next few weeks for as long as Jay Cutler's out.
Certainly got a real wide receiver in Landry, on pace to catch over 100 balls, no matter who's throwing him the football at this point. For the Ravens, marking guys in the secondary, it hasn't been as much of an issue as it has been tackling, as it has been scheme where the Ravens have been out of position at various points, letting guys run free. I'm assuming Landry will not be a guy running free on Thursday night, but certainly a part of the Dolphins' offense.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's the prime piece of this offense, I think, after Jay Ajayi. And the interesting thing is when Devontae Parker, who has missed the last couple of weeks, went out, there was a real question on whether they would be able to push the ball down the field because he's not only a deep threat, but just a big-bodied receiver. He brings a different dynamic. Well, the last couple of weeks, they've been able to overcome that. And Jarvis Landry, though known to be a slot guy and more of a possession receiver, has run more routes down the field, and he and Kenny Stills have been a dynamic 1-2 punch despite Parker's presence. So Landry he was Ryan Tannehill's best friend. He was Jay Cutler, quickly a best friend for him, and Matt Moore and Jarvis Landry have great rapport from over the years. So I would think that he's going to be definitely in double-digit targets and will likely catch maybe that many balls on Thursday night against the Ravens.
Greg Likens covers all things fins and fish down in South Florida at the 790 The Ticket out on Twitter, as well as at his name, Greg Likens. That's Likens. This intelligent WNST chat, all brought to you by our friends at DNL Window Tinting. 26 years of tinting everything. Cars, boats, businesses. They put the shades on the sun and they take away the squint. They've been doing that now at 2 locations on the east side in Parkville and in White Marsh. DNL Window Tinting. Greg Likens joining us here to discuss a Dolphins offensive line that, will always be tied to draft night when Laramie Tunsil was supposed to be the best player in the draft. We wind up with Ronnie Stanley. He winds up in a gas mask bong video and now winds up protecting the backside of Matt Moore this week. Some thoughts about Tunsil and where his progression is. For me, he's always going to be measured against Ronnie Stanley amongst our fan base.
You're right. I think those two picks are going to forever be compared to each other. And the interesting thing, too, Nestor, if we see the developments of this week, Laramie Tunsil, the Dolphins picked him at number 13 in part because they traded back in the draft from the number 8 slot with the Philadelphia Eagles. As part of that deal, they got Kiko Alonso, who's been a very good player for them, and cornerback Byron Maxwell. And this week, Byron Maxwell was released by the Dolphins. So as far as a reach it may be, Laramie Tunsil, Ronnie Stanley are connected to Byron Maxwell, who was just gotten rid of, despite the fact he's paid nearly $10 million this year. And so getting back to your question, Tunsil has played pretty well. I think he's going to be a game-time decision because he left the game against the Jets early and is dealing with an injury. So not sure what his status is going to be come game time. I think it's truly, with the short week, going to be a game-time decision when he warms up. Jesse Davis filled in for him and did a decent job in the second half. But Tunsil, up to this point, they think really, really highly of him and feel that he has the potential, at least physically, to be a future Hall of Famer. So they're really happy with the pick up to this point.
Gase has done a nice job there amidst all of this, right? I mean, we're looking up. They're 4-2. We're not. We were in Minnesota a couple days ago where they've gone from Bridgewater to Bradford, now to Case Keenum, and they're talking about hosting and playing in the Super Bowl later on in the year. Teams have gone through this adversity, and I really give it off of the cap to last week, obviously, to Mike Zimmer, and this week to Adam Gase to say, teams on their third quarterback aren't supposed to be 2 games over 500.
Right. I mean, it's not just the third quarterback, although I think that's a big factor. They also, because of Hurricane Irma, were displaced for a week, and now they don't have a bye week because they didn't play in week 1 and had to practice out in the Los Angeles area. There have been so many different distractions, Nestor. Heck, we had an assistant coach apparently doing lines of cocaine in his office before a meeting, and that was taken on video. I mean, there have been all sorts of things going on.
I love how you say apparently when there was video of it. And, and I know Chris Foerster. I knew him when he was a coach here. I liked him. I don't want to say I socialized with him. That's probably the wrong thing to say, but I certainly knew him. I knew he strummed the guitar. I had a meal or two with him over the course of time. I was, and I'm sure everyone taken aback, and I'm sure Adam Gase was taken aback, as was Stephen Ross and everyone else in his world. The immediacy is how dare you. Then it's also, boy, how bad must it be for you? I mean, that actually happened in an NFL facility. That's not a good look for anybody.
No, it's not. And so I only say that because they haven't confirmed it, but it certainly looks.
Right.
All the reports said a white powdery substance, so we can read between the lines.
I'm assuming it wasn't Ajax, like in backing up in smoke. So yes.
Right, exactly. So between that and then Lawrence Timmons literally disappearing the night before their season opener and going AWOL, and now is back with the team and playing good football. But I mean, there have been all sorts of crazy things going on. So then you take a look at the record, you're like 4-2. My goodness, with the missing quarterbacks. give Adam Gase a lot of credit. If you look back at his now 1+ seasons with the team dating back to last year has gone 13-4 in its last 17 regular season games. And they've done that with the quarterback change.
By the way, that's a big number. Say that 13-4 in their last 17 games. I mean, Bill Belichick hasn't done that.
Well, it's the last 17 regular season games. New England is the best in the league over that span at 14-3. So
there you go.
They're a game behind, and they're matched. Kansas City is the only other team with the same record, 13-4 in the last 17 regular season games. And the crazy thing, Nestor, for years, the Dolphins have seemingly found ways to lose football games. When it was close, getting in the fourth quarter, they do something to mess things up. They've now won 12 games in a row when the margin is 7 points or less. So it's uncharacteristic from what we've become accustomed to, but I think Adam Gase deserves a ton of credit because for whatever reason, the culture, the attitude, the belief is there with this team that if it's down to the nitty-gritty late in the game, they're going to get it done.
3 consecutive primetime games, the Ravens on Thursday night, the Raiders next Sunday, and then the Panthers the following Monday night. And the weird part of this whole Patriots-Bills thing, that they won't face any of them until Thanksgiving weekend, and then face them both twice, including the Patriots twice in 3 weeks, then the Bills twice in 3 weeks. It is a wacky schedule, I don't think I've ever seen a schedule like this.
No, it is really weird. And, I've got friends in the media up in Buffalo and in New England, and they're like, I can't believe that they're cramming all those games at the end of the season. And they've already played the Jets twice. And, realistically, when you look at their schedule, it will get more difficult. So they've taken advantage of some poor competition, I think, early on, and certainly some teams that have played below expectations. But it's going to be difficult. The 3 primetime games in a row, that's cool. The fans are into that. But I think, when you look at New England, then Denver, then New England again, Buffalo, Kansas City, Buffalo to finish out the season. With the way New England, Buffalo, and Kansas City are playing right now, and that's going to be a difficult stretch. So that's why they need to get as many wins now to try to compensate for how hard it's going to be at the end of this year.
He is Greg Likens. You can find him at Greg Likens out on Twitter as well. Longtime a journalist down there in the South Florida area covering all things Dolphins. He's now at $7.90 the ticket. This portion of our programming brought to you by Lee Tessier and his team at Keller Williams American Premier Realty. List your house with him. You risk nothing. His team's going to get your house sold, especially up there in the Harford County area, anywhere in northern Baltimore County. LeeTessier.com, the way to find him. Another good Dundalk guy there as well. So we do appreciate all of his work for leukemia and the LLS folks back in the past. Greg Likens, my guest here, talking all things Dolphins on the eve of Thursday night. I don't know what to make of the Ravens on this thing here, but stopping the run has really been one of their issues. Tackling's been one of their issues, but just moving the ball in general with this many backups, we're going to see that big defense over there. And, jumping right off, you see Cameron Wake, who gets after quarterbacks, and you see Ndamukong Suh that takes on doubles and triples unlike anybody else in the league. What else should we know about that defense right now, Greg?
Yeah, you mentioned 2 of the key cogs. Another guy who has played phenomenal football is Rashad Jones, the safety position, who missed most of last season due to injury, but has been a Pro Bowler in the past, and he is playing up to that level again. He just seems to come up with big plays at the right time. He sealed the deal in Atlanta with an interception of Matt Ryan at the end of the fourth quarter to complete that comeback from 17-0 down at halftime to a 2017 victory, and he's all over the place. The other thing to look out for, because Joe Flacco in Baltimore should be able to throw the football for as much as I praise the safety play. At cornerback, they've got a second-year guy in Xavier Howard, and then a rookie third-round pick in Cordray Tankersley as the 2 starters. And so if there's a weakness for Baltimore to exploit, it's in the passing attack in terms of their pass defense, because Tankersley is unproven, though, as I pointed out earlier, they did waive Byron Maxwell.
Yeah, what happened there? We saw the Browns giving Joe Hayden away. Washed-up cornerbacks, right? It happens quickly, doesn't it?
It happens quickly, and I also think there's an instance there where, Maxwell had gotten a big contract. You wonder if he had become complacent, and he's got some young guys behind him who wanted it more. The coaches saw that. And then part of the problem, too, Nestor, is, if you get to a certain level of your playing career, you're not playing special teams. So the Dolphins had Maxwell inactive for the last few weeks because he brought nothing else to the table outside of playing corner, and they didn't plan on playing him there. So he doesn't provide value at defensive back, and quite frankly, next year they would have owed him almost $10 million. Now that they've released him, that is not on the books for next season. And based on the way the playing time was being distributed, he wasn't in their plans anyway. So I think it made a lot of sense for them just to move on.
Well, certainly a lot of familiarity here. You mentioned, ex-Eagles. I look up and down that roster, and I see Bushrod, who's a Towson guy via New Orleans. I see Julius Thomas, who came in from Denver, and Ndamukong Suh from the Lions. But we're very familiar with Ray Malaluga from his background in Cincinnati, and certainly Timmons up in Pittsburgh, Kiko Alonso from Philadelphia and Buffalo. I mean, there's been a lot of pushed-around guys on this team, a lot of guys that are on their second or third stop.
Yes, you're right. And I think Matt Burke, a name that not a lot of people around the NFL know because he's a first-time coordinator, he took over for Vance Joseph, who had got the Denver Broncos coaching job. He's done an excellent job in his first opportunity as defensive coordinator in the NFL. And so far has this team, if the defense hasn't been what it's been, there's no way they'd be 4-2 at this point. Because even in their difficult games, they got shut out by the Saints. They held New Orleans to 20 points, and they've been able to stifle a lot of offenses along the way and keep this offense that has been putrid at times in the game. So they deserve a ton of credit. I'm just concerned, Nestor, as you well know up in Baltimore, the Dolphins can't seem to win a game against this Ravens team, especially on the road. The only time the Dolphins won in Baltimore was back in 1997. So, and 0-3 all-time at M&T Bank Stadium. So at some point, it seems in this series, you kind of throw the records out, kind of throw out how the teams are playing, and the Dolphins are going to have to get over that hump. And I know it's a new group of players, but last year the Dolphins went on a nice run and ultimately made the playoffs. But it didn't look like a playoff team when the Ravens took care of them 38-6 in Week 13.
Well, they'll be running around in their purple and orange pajamas on Thursday night. The 4-2 Miami Dolphins coming in to take on the Ravens, who have really been scuffling and certainly still reeling from the loss in Minnesota on Sunday. Greg, always appreciate the time and the insights for all things fish. We'll stay in touch throughout the course of the season. Good luck to you down there in South Florida, man.
Thanks, Nestor. Always good to talk to you.
You got it. Greg Likens, that's Likens, longtime journalist down there in South Florida. He's now at 790 The Ticket in Miami. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We come in crystal clear. I want to give a shout out to our friends at Box Hill Pizzeria. I call it a crab cakeria. It's the best crab cakes in Harford County, and they can now be shipped anywhere in the world at boxhillpizzeria.com. Next time you're up there, stop and see Tommy and Chris. Tell them you want some salad dressing. Take home a bottle of their dressing, and you'll see why it's the only dressing we use in our house. The morning newspaper delivers at 7 a.m. each and every morning to your email inbox digitally. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. I am Nestor. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube WNST TV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.